Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all standing firm and are well and staying safe. Over the last few weeks, I've been spending some time chatting with Nigel Lloyd from Gateway Church in Wrexham, and he shared with me some incredible stories of a trip that he made some while ago to mainland China. And I felt so inspired by what he shared. I felt I wanted to interview him more formally and present it to us. These stories are thrilling and they're real, and I want you to be blessed by hearing them. Sadly, the connection between us was not brilliant, so please bear with me and bear with us. Do work through it. And I'm sure when you hear the things that Nigel has to share with us, I'm sure that you will be greatly blessed and greatly encouraged. Well, it's great to spend some time with Nigel Lloyd from Gateway Church in Wrexham. And Nigel, it's great to see you. Welcome. How's lockdown for you in Wrexham at the moment?
I suppose because we're able to help a lot in the community, so we've been doing a lot of collecting prescriptions, doing shopping, working in food banks, that sort of stuff, which actually has been great because it's given us an opportunity to meet with people that we wouldn't normally have met.
Yeah.
So we've got teams of people working through that. So a lot of community work really, which still continues.
Yeah, and I understand you've been dropping off bottles of Prosecco on neighbours' doorsteps. Is that the kind of thing a church minister should be doing?
Yeah, you should have lived next door. We did. It's Callie, not me. It's all Callie's ideas. Get the neighbours drunk. What we've done is that we have neighbours that we know on different sides and across the road. So just at different occasions, we've been baking cakes. On VE Day, we gave them a bottle of Prosecco and some nibbles and stuff so they could celebrate. Callie's latest one was to bless the bin men. So the bin men for the recycling and the green bin and the whatever, they've had cakes as well. So it's my wife. She's not at work, so she's finding something to do by blessing all these neighbours.
Nigel, a couple of weeks ago, we were chatting together about how churches cope during strange times and the disruption of formality and do we lose touch with God and all that kind of stuff. And you began to share something that really, really inspired me. It was concerning a trip to China some years ago. How long ago was that?
It was late 80s, that I visited China. So children were very little.
Yeah, so you went with Terry Virgo, Rodney Kingston. Was that the team you went with?
It was a team across. So there were a team from New Frontiers. There was some from Ichthus. There were some Anglican guys. There were some Baptist guys, and there was some from Pioneer.
Yeah.
So it was across denominations, really, or movements.
Fantastic. And from the conversation we had, it sounded like an incredibly inspiring time. Is there an overview that you have of that? If you look back on it and you think, what were the highlights for you? We'll go into detail in a minute, but what were the highlights for you? What did you come away with?
Probably something that you can't really grasp until you've been into a situation. Because if you could have said that you can smell, feel, grasp revival, and you know that you are in it, you know that is the presence of God. So the overriding thing would be that. And so suddenly when you go into, you suddenly go, oh, this is the presence of God then.
Yeah.
I was leading then a charismatic church, probably about 150 at that time members, and that sort of stuff. You come back and you go, oh, so the tangible presence of God in a nation like that I've never experienced before, or to be honest, Mark, since. Which is not a good thing to say, is it? This is the presence of God. And when people describe it, you read it and it says it was heavy. So you know it. So you lose almost a little bit of control of yourself. Your emotions are very affected. Your thought train is very affected almost immediately once you get, away from the airport and into these different areas. So the
Yeah.
presence of God is the thing, really. Never experienced it again since,
Yeah.
but would love to.
Hopefully not a once in a lifetime experience.
Yeah, it's going to be that and then heaven. I don't know.
Yeah. So this was a China that was heavily oppressed through communism, and the church essentially having to meet secretly.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
the church, there was a state church, the Three Self Church, but
Mm.
we were going into the underground church.
Yeah.
So they were churches that had no official identity. Like, we've got, well, we can, this is our website, and this is where we meet, and this is their charity status and all of that sort of stuff. These are just, there's nothing like that. There's no structure or behind it at all. These are just groups of people that are mysteriously meeting.
Yeah, and one of those you happened to mention to me was meeting on at the back of a police station, but somehow the police had no idea they were there. Tell me about that.
I mean, we based ourselves in 3 places. So we got on a train to a place called Guangzhou, and if you can imagine, this is like a terraced house on several levels, and often what they're doing is that they are meeting in secret, usually for one meeting, but these were continuing, and these were just guys that had prayed by anybody. So if you can imagine, this is a terraced house. The whole house is stripped out. There's nothing in it. There's no seats. We go in, and there is a pastor that was singing and prayer, but literally it was next door to the police station. So when we're walking up, I actually felt and thought that we'd been caught out, because we were all, if you like, we were tourists. Our visas said teachers, and I thought, this is it. We're just going to get arrested. But we went next door, and crammed to the rafters, are hundreds and thousands of people that are sitting on the floor in the middle of a church. And they had prayed that the police would not see them, but the audacity was that they were in the next building. So the police were outside smoking, the cars were arriving, the motorbikes were coming and going, and their noses, literally, because they asked God for that, and that's what they got. And they were coming in and out in front of their noses, and they were just unseen. It was frightening for us, because you think, well, in your mindset, you're going to get arrested. But we went in, and we were in there for several hours for a meeting, and then we left, and we retired back to our hotel room.
So Nigel, you've come from a relatively formal context in comparison to the Chinese church and what you were experiencing there. How did you feel when you walked into an environment of worshippers? People are praying for each other. What was the striking difference between your own experiences previous to that and then coming into that?
So when you walk through the door, the meeting had already been in progress for some hours, but it isn't a meeting, because there are people that are just praying. And if you can remember the days when we used to all pray out loud, it's that, but in Chinese. So you are walking into that, they're sitting on the floor, and they're praying. They're all pretty much in young people, pretty much in the old-fashioned, like, top and trousers, so that there is no formality to it. A huge amount of prayer. I think meeting the pastor was a challenge, in terms of we didn't meet the pastor till afterwards, but he had been in prison for 25 years.
Wow.
So what you notice was him being in prison for 25 years, prayer, suffering, poverty, those sort of things come almost as part and parcel of who they are. And so when you were greeted with an amazing amount of young people, but it wasn't that anybody led anything. You would be praying, and almost on the different floors, somebody would spontaneously, to me, sing an old-fashioned hymn. It was in Chinese, but it was English, but it would come, and there'd be another floor that was singing that. And the only thing that was corporate was when the pastor spoke, and he had a very bad PA system that went with wires down the floor, and he addressed the people. The prayer for things like healing and stuff like that was something that was at a level that I hadn't seen ever before, in terms of what they were praying for and who they were praying for. Parts of it we would think were very old-fashioned, singing of hymns we would have dismissed years ago, but it just burst out. So the common thing was these people were praying all the time, and we just sat around amongst them, really, on the floor.
So you didn't necessarily understand the content of what they were praying, apart from when they tried to sing a hymn badly in English. But how connected did you feel because of the presence of God?
I think you feel connected at a level that I've never ever known before, because we when we talk about we're united as Western people, we understand that in terms of an academic theological position, but it isn't an academic theological position. God has actually done something to join you, so you feel amazingly in the middle of it and taken up by it, not particularly just emotionally, but by the fact that God is here. And God is moving and God is speaking, and it's that joins you together. So we hadn't got a clue what was going on, apart from that you didn't want to leave. You want it, you hear these people say, if only we could have bottled it, but we knew we were going on to other things. So I think that's probably something that you amazingly joined to them in heart, but joined because it is the presence of God, really.
You spoke of a pastor that you met who was in bed.
We did.
Not the normal position for someone leading a meeting or the pastor of the church to be in. I do recommend it. I think it'd be a great idea, sleeping on the job. But tell me something about him.
Well, he, again, another man that had been in prison for 25 years or so. It tended to be the standard punishment if you were a leader of a church in the era of Mao Zedong. So they were imprisoned really as religious political influencers. So he too had been in prison, but we'd flown into Beijing, and we were taken in a minibus to an area on the outskirts of Beijing to meet the pastor of one of the underground churches. And so we were taken to his house, which would have been to us no bigger than probably 3 rooms with a toilet, bathroom, so bedroom, kitchen, whatever, small, really small. And that when we got there, this pastor was paralyzed, and we were just taken aback by it, just by the fact. So that's enough to make you want to give up, really. And now he's paralyzed, and can he lead a church? Well, the way that he led the church was that he pastored head only, by you going to see him. He preached his sermons by just talking to young men who preached his sermons for him, and he prayed for the sick. So they would come to his bedside and he would pray for them. And the extraordinary thing that I could never work, theology is sometimes just bigger than you. And in the fact that he would pray for them and they would be healed. But as far as I knew after that, he still remained unhealed. So he led the church as a paralyzed man from his one bedroom. And the church was something like, I don't know, 10, 12. The trouble is, when it's into the many thousands, they don't really know how many it is. Because it's not like us, you can't count them because they meet in so many different places. But humbling. I mean, it made me think. I'll go back to being an engineer. Really, there's nowhere that I am anywhere near this man relationship with God and his understanding of God and his heart for people. If I'm paralyzed, I don't want you to leave the church. I want you to buy me flowers and chocolates and turn my pillow and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he's just doing this and seeing miracles and growth. And you'd ask him things like, what is the size of your church? And they don't know. And what, how is the church? I don't know. But he just carries on through. It's when we just it ruins you emotionally, ruins you, because I think things like, well, I'm grumpy on a Sunday if I can't get a cup of coffee, and he's leading the church paralysed, and seeing signs and wonders and
Incredible.
growth and healing and raising from the dead that
Yeah.
I have never seen.
Yeah, incredible.
So who am I?
With the signs and wonders side of things, obviously for us, if you get someone with a headache healed on a Sunday morning, you want to write a book about it. It's such an unusual occurrence to get a really dramatic healing. But some of the stories you shared, it seems to me that signs and wonders are a natural part of their existence, and not just that we hope it might happen one day. Let's pray for a bit more power. So you actually talked about someone who's risen from the dead on a kitchen table.
Yeah, I think if you take our lockdown, for instance, when we haven't got the institution of church, but the God hasn't changed, and so one of their forms of evangelism is actually to pray. Yeah. And when you're in poverty and you're in sickness at the level that they were, then it is the bit, come, let me introduce you to the God that I know. So it's very common for them to use that as a form of evangelism. But we had gone we were invited to meet a lady that had been raised from the dead. It's not some of the things that I do on a regular basis, but we were all trailed in again, from the minibus, and we went into a very humble place, and the pastor brought out the young pastor brought out this lady. I think probably she's one of those ladies, Chinese ladies that probably was about 50 but looked about 70, and she did die, and the church felt they wanted to pray for her to be raised from the dead, so they laid her on a kitchen table, and their prayer rota was to put all the church, as long as it took, to go round, and you prayed for as long as you felt God instructed you to pray for. Yeah. So you'd lay hands on it and pray. And you're not supposed to say the lucky guy. Eventually there's one guy that comes and prays because she's raised from the dead.
Wow.
And of course, she does that incredible thing that you read in the Bible, and I'm hungry and I'm thirsty. Can you give me something to eat? And can you? Wow. But if you meet with the pastors, the young guys that are almost like the apprentices of these people that have been in prison, they talk about raising the dead over a cup of coffee. It's not an unusual thing for somebody to be raised from the dead. Yeah. And their whole understanding is, well, no, that's what God does. Not all the time. Many died, but there were times in the church life when the dead were raised and they were a part of the church, and it's great for evangelism.
Yes.
when you talk, her whole family, not just her family that are close, her whole family came to Christ.
Yeah, incredible.
I just come and meet somebody that was raised from the dead is very spooky.
Wow.
But we met more, but she was an extraordinary story.
Yeah. I guess for us, we for us, signs and wonders, we know the Bible teaches us that it's a part of the gospel, and it's but for us it becomes more of a therapy, doesn't it? It's we want to bring a therapeutic process to a person's dire need, as opposed to it being something that glorifies Jesus and leads a person and their family to Christ. Excuse me. Which obviously is in a completely different context to the context you experience in China. But is there something you think about looking back on that? You think, if only we could grasp this about what it is to live truly in the power and the promises of God, as opposed to we're doing this, which doesn't seem to bear a great deal of fruit. Is there something like that that you look at and you yearn for? You said it's a once in a lifetime experience almost. You experience that, you've never experienced it again. But do you see what I'm coming from?
I think in the end, it's sovereign. What can you do about that? You can't do anything about that. There's a sovereignty of God about that. I think that their desire to pray. I mean, our church is still saying this because I can say this because your church are listening to it. So you probably leave this bit in, Mark. Our churches are still awful at praying any length of time and together. So they all prayed together. I think our understanding of God, I mean, if I may just tell you a story, there was, I think I mentioned to you about the lady that we met. Right? She too had been in prison for 20 odd years, but they arrested her again. If you can imagine, in Shanghai, there's something called the Bund, which is on the side of the river. And they strapped her to the side of the Bund, and they said, well, if she's fortunate, the tide will only come up to here, and she will be fortunate, the tide will come up here and she will die, and that will be her judgment for being the pastor of a church of many thousands. So she'd already been in. So the church said, no, we believe God's bigger than the tide. So they just had a prayer meeting. I mean, I don't know what your prayer meetings are like, but mine are not to tell the tide to go back.
No, no.
But they called them, and again, like the raising of the dead, they prayed that the tide would never get higher than her mouth. It never got higher than her mouth, and she was released as innocent because the judgment that they'd placed upon her, saying that the judgment would be this. If the tide came up, she was guilty. If it didn't, she was innocent. So they then said, she's innocent, they let her go. That is a level of faith and understanding of God that I don't have.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? So it seems to me that one of the keys is prayer, and just hearing what you're saying, prayer seems to just undergird their whole experience, which actually is not a formula. It's saying, God, we trust you and only you to change this circumstance.
We met a guy in a hotel room, and they brought him in, and very frail man. He explained that when he went into prison, he was put in solitary confinement for 25 years. And when he was arrested, a little bit of the Bible. So he'd got a partial of a psalm, and the only thing that he could remember was the on a hill far away. And so in a morning, he read out the piece of psalm that he had. So he did what God had given him. One piece of psalm, it's all I've got, so I'll use that. And I have this one hymn, so I'll do that. So he in the morning, he read out the psalm, and out of the bars, no glass bars, he sang to the rest of them, the old rugged cross. When they opened up the gates, when communism fell and they let him out, the whole of the prison was saved.
Wow.
So they came to him and they said to him, you are now our pastor. There was thousands in the prison. So the church that he was leading are all the ex-cons that had been in prison with him, generally political prisoners and stuff like that. So they're all there. And I think it's that sense of that. It's almost as if, it sounds awful to say this, that the God that I worship apparently is a different God, but it isn't. It's the same God. It's me that's different.
Yeah.
Because, I have more than the old rugged cross. I have more than a piece of a psalm, but I just don't use it. And it's that God has given you this, so use it. So he just went, okay, that's what it says in the Bible. I'll do that, and it will bear fruit. So he did it, and so it's that level of understanding of God that is just different.
Nigel, it's incredibly inspiring. It really is. Ever since we first spoke about this, it's not left me. I can't shake this from my mind and from my heart. And not that we yearn for something that once happened, but I do yearn for the God that made those things happen. And it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to hear these stories. firsthand, not from a book where, did you read that book? But from someone who went and witnessed it and felt the emotion and felt the energy and felt the presence of God. Thank you for sharing with us today, Nigel. It's been an absolute joy. I don't know about you, but when I hear stories like that, they often belong in a book somewhere that someone wrote a long time ago. I don't often speak to friends who had seen the dead raised and the kind of miracles that Nigel was talking about. I hope you are encouraged by that. Do pray for the church that we would truly be a people empowered by the Holy Spirit, that actually would be known as a people of the Spirit, a people distinguished from other people on the face of the earth because of the presence of God. God bless you in all that you do over this coming week. Pray for one another, stand firm together, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.